In the 1960s and 1970s, trade magazines devoted to the trucking industry would publish a yearly list of the top carriers in the nation, ranked in order of their revenues. Some of the list would go into further detail, like the number of tractors and trailers each company had in their fleet. The Interstate Commerce Commission required all carriers to submit financial reports and segregated the carriers into different classes, Class 1 being the trucking companies with the highest revenues over a certain threshold. The first year with the most detailed statistics was put out for the year 1939, just 4 years after the trucking industry began being regulated. Of that list, there were 132 truck lines that passed the threshold to be classified as a Class 1 motor carrier. This video will cover the smallest of them, the 11 companies that were just above the cutoff point to be a Class 1 carrier. 1939 was still early in trucking history, and many of the companies mentioned will soon have become fallen flags, either from being absorbed into others or for a variety of other reasons. Many of the names you may not have ever heard before. As we go up this list, you'll recognize others that became much bigger. Future videos will provide a more detailed history of many of the companies on the list. A lot of them have interesting backgrounds. So let's cover the first 11 at the bottom of the list of the 132 Class 1 motor carriers of 1939. At number 132, we have Oregon California Fast Freight and Nevada California Fast Freight, a combined company with routes spanning over 1,404 regular route miles. Revenue figures of $266,476 were for the first 6 months of 1939. Net income during the same 6-month period was only $26,659. The combined companies had 50 trucks and tractors in the fleet and 112 employees. Why were the financial results only for the first 6 months of 1939? That's because these carriers were merged into another firm that created Oregon, Nevada, California Fast Freight, which will show up in a minute in the number 130 spot in revenues. At number 131 is another carrier that reported financial results for a shorter period than the entire year. Huber & Huber Motor Express Incorporated was the successor company to the original non-corporate firm under the same name. The incorporated carrier began on October 31st, 1939, so the finances were only for 2 months. Revenues of $324,904. Route miles for the company was 1,016. There was 142 trucks and tractors in the fleet, along with 505 employees. In 1939, Huber & Huber Motor Express provided overnight service between Louisville, Kentucky, Chicago, Indianapolis, Chicago, and Atlanta, Georgia. Number 130 is the newly combined company of Oregon, Nevada, California Fast Freight, later to be known as ONC. Revenues for the last 6 months of 1939 were $347,362. Net income fell to $17,669, reflecting the cost of combining all the predecessor companies into one carrier. You may not recognize the name of the carrier at number 129 on the list. It was known as Transport Corporation of Virginia in 1939 and was headquartered in the small town of Blackstone, Virginia. It was the first of many carriers with revenues over $500,000. They were a contract carrier of tobacco and cigarettes for Leggett and Myers and also Reynolds Tobacco, which meant they had operations in Durham and Winston-Salem, North Carolina. As early as 1937, Transport Corporation of Virginia had 30 routes in the 7 states of Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New Jersey. Today, the company is known as Epps Transport System, based out of Greensboro, North Carolina. I remember in the early 1980s, I drew a full-color rendering of one of their trucks when their fleet color was green. I put it in a frame and sent it to them, and yes, they paid me for it. It was the first drawing I ever sold to a trucking company. I only wish now that I had taken a photo of that check as a memory. The next is Alabama Freight Lines at number 128. And yes, it is Alabama and not Alabama. Alabama had a network of 1,315 route miles. Revenues in 1939 were $509,877. The company had started 20 years before and ran from El Paso, Texas, west to California. Another Texas carrier was Red Ball Motor Freight Lines at number 127 on our list. The company was named after a railroad term, Red Ball, which meant moving fast freight right on through to its destination. The company experienced rapid growth when acquired in 1928 by Henry E. English. When he bought the company, it consisted of a common carrier certificate authorizing to haul freight over 118 miles along Highway 35 between the Texas cities of Lufkin and Houston. It only had 4 employees and 2 trucks at the time. 10 years later, there were 120 trucks, 200 employees, and almost 1,700 miles of routes between 28 freight stations. In 1939, revenues hit $516,261. One of many motor freight carriers serving the highly industrialized state of Michigan was Michigan Interstate Motor Freight. With 1,836 miles of routes, their terminals were in such cities across Michigan like Kalamazoo, Saginaw, Lansing, Jackson, Grand Rapids, and Detroit. The company was formed in 1930 to take over the business of Hanson Trucking Company, which had 10 trucks at the time, operating between Chicago and Kalamazoo, Michigan. In 1939, revenues were $514,909. Moving on to number 125 on the list is Florida-based Central Truck Lines. Formed by Sidney Allen in 1926 with a single truck, by 1939 had grown to a sizable carrier, with 1,615 miles of routes across Florida and Georgia. There were 68 trucks and trailers in the fleet. Central did very little in interline freight with other carriers. Kushman Motor Delivery Company was headquartered in Detroit, Michigan, and provided service to points in Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan. At number 124, Kushman had 1,655 miles of routes, using 42 trucks and tractors. With only $85,000 in assets, the company used both company-owned equipment and owner-operators leased to Kushman. Very little interline freight was handled with other carriers. 1939 revenues were $525,000, and net income was only $52,000 in that year. Kirby Kirby of Trenton, New Jersey, also had a terminal in Wilmington, Delaware, and Atlantic City. It's the first trucking company on the list that failed to make money in 1939, losing $321,000 on revenues of $532,000. Kirby Kirby ran a 542 route mile company. The last one on our list for this video is Gillette Motor Transport at number 122 of the countdown. In 1939, the carrier was based in Dallas, Texas, and had terminals there in Houston, El Paso, Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Kansas City, Phoenix, and Los Angeles. Well, that's it for the first 11 on our list. The next video will showcase the countdowns from rank 121 to 111. And all of these companies in the next video will too have revenues in the $500,000 range. A lot of them are ones that you've never heard of, and a few of them you may have heard of but don't know much about their history. So we'll see you in the next video, and if you've liked this one, leave a comment. And if you're not a subscriber, be sure to become one. Thank you. See ya.